Kneeling in the workshop, covered in grease and tears, the 11-year-old girl was changing a tire while her stepfather screamed. The millionaire saw the scene, froze, and what he did next, no one expected. The ground was cold, smeared with dark, oil and scattered metal shards, as if someone had dumped the skeleton of a dead machine there. The kneeling girl looked like part of the scenery, an oversized jumpsuit stained with grease slipping off one narrow shoulder. Her small hands trembled. Around the lug wrench, the rusty jack creaked, almost mocking her with every turn. Silent tears fell as she strained her body, her knees pressed into the concrete, as if that car, that wheel, that moment carried the weight of an entire lifetime. Her stepfather stood behind her, his shadow stretched long under the yellow light of the warehouse. He yelled, not with ordinary anger, but with disdain. "Quit crying, you useless brat. Come on, turn the damn thing before I do it myself." She tried, but her arm wasn't strong enough. The wheel slipped again. He took a step forward. She flinched even before the sound of his boot echoed. Only the jack's groaning answered. That's when a black car slowed down on the narrow street, flanked by grey walls. Inside, a man in a flawless suit was speaking on his phone. He was about to close a deal worth 8 figures, but his voice stopped mid-sentence. "Hello?" someone asked on the other end. He didn't answer. His eyes were locked on the image through the darkened window, a girl kneeling, crying silently as she struggled with a tire, and behind her, a man, a twisted, mouth mid-shout, a raised hand, and a crowbar nearby. There was a second of silence, the kind that shouldn't exist on a living street. The millionaire hung up without thinking. He stepped out of the car, his shoes sinking into the mud at the curb. The air smelled of burnt oil and lost childhood. As he neared the workshop entrance, he heard the girl's low voice. "I can do it. Just a little more." But her stepfather had already raised his hand, ready for the next outburst or worse. He walked in, without knocking. The sound of the door hitting metal made both of them turn at once. The man in the suit stopped, looked into her eyes. They were red, but it wasn't just exhaustion, it was fear. Old fear, the kind that lives inside. His stomach turned. He who was used to signing contracts that shaped companies' futures now faced a choice no contract could prepare him for. He pointed. His voice came out steady. "She's coming with me, now." The stepfather laughed, a short, mocking laugh. "Who the hell do you think you are? Get out of here before I call the cops." But the millionaire didn't move. He stood tall like he was at a negotiation table, only there were no numbers now, no clauses. Just the girl. She, still gripping, the wrench frozen. "She's coming with me," he repeated lower. "You're never laying a hand on her again." Silence returned, but it was a different silence now, heavier. The girl slowly stood, her knees leaving a dark stain on the floor. The stepfather looked at her, then at the man in the suit, and for a moment he seemed to measure something invisible. But he still didn't know the worst part, because that girl wasn't just a victim. She knew things no one in that room could imagine, and when she took her first step toward the man who promised to get her out, something in the air shifted. As if the past was about to unlock its doors, and the millionaire unknowingly had just gotten involved in a secret buried for more than a decade. The car moved silently down the wet road, the sound of rain on the windshield louder than it should have been. The girl sat in the passenger seat, curled up, her eyes fixed on the fogged-up glass. Her hands still bore traces of grease, and the stain on her knee slowly spread, darkening the already torn fabric. The man behind the wheel said nothing. Neither did she. The space between them was made of things unsaid, fear, doubt, and that invisible question hanging in the air. Now what? She glanced sideways at him. The wet suit, the face too serious for someone who had just barged into a garage and taken a child. But there was something in his eyes, something that didn't match the numbers and contracts, as if he were trying to remember something, or forget it. They drove for nearly an hour until he stopped in front of a dark, discreet building. He turned off the engine and only then spoke, for the first time since leaving the garage. "You'll be safe here." She didn't answer. Her gaze stayed on the building's entrance, where a doorman watched them with curiosity. The man sighed, got out, and walked around to her side. When he extended his hand, There was a pause. She hesitated. Then slowly, she placed her small hand in his. For the first time, no one yelled at her for taking too long. Inside the apartment, everything felt too big. The lights were soft, the air smelled of coffee and wood. He turned on a few lamps, pulled a blanket onto the couch, and told her she could stay there until the next day. "We'll figure out the rest after." She sat slowly, as if it was all still a test. He went to the kitchen and returned with a cup of tea. "What's your name?" he asked. She didn't respond right away. Then, barely audible, she said, "Lena." He nodded. "Nice to meet you, Lena. My name is Dorian." But Lena didn't say nice. "To meet you." She stayed silent, watching his every move like she expected a trap, and for a moment he almost wanted to give up. This was madness. He was an investor, a strategist, not a savior. But when he looked into her eyes again, something tugged at his chest. It was as if this girl had lived more than he had, and with much less. That night Lena didn't sleep. She sat curled up on the couch, eyes open in the dark, listening to every sound in the house. Her mind raced, memories cutting like glass. She was 9 when her mother disappeared. A regular night, a rushed dinner, then emptiness. No one explained. No one really looked. A month later, she was living with her stepfather. The marks on her arms came soon after. Then came the punishments, the garage, the forced silence. Even crying had become forbidden. She remembered the first time she changed. A tire. She could barely reach the bolt. The fear of failing was heavier than the wheel. But she never failed, she couldn't. And even when she got it right, he said, "You did less than the bare minimum." She grew up believing the world was a place where you breathed fear and swallowed pain. To this day, she slept with clenched fists. Dorian didn't sleep either. He stayed in his office, staring at reports that no longer made sense. His mind was elsewhere, in that garage, with that girl. Something about her reminded him of someone. He didn't know who. Maybe himself years ago when he still believed he could fix things. But life had shown him otherwise. Pain doesn't go away with good intentions. By late morning, Lena was still awake. When he brought her a plate of food, she looked at it suspiciously. It took time to accept it, but she ate, in silence, as if every bite could be punished. And when he told her he wanted to take her to a doctor, that she needed a safe place, she responded for the first time with a full sentence. "If I leave, he'll find me." Dorian froze. "He who?" She bit her lip. "The man at the garage. He has stuff. My papers. And he knows people. If he wants to, he'll find me." Dorian felt a chill in his gut. This went beyond abuse. It was deeper, more dangerous. And there was something in her eyes that still hadn't come out. And then she said it. "I know where my mom's body is." The world seemed to stop for a moment. And with that sentence, everything changed. Dorian went silent. The echo of her words, "I know where my mother's body is," seemed to erase everything else in the house. Even the ticking of the living room clock had stopped. Lena bit the corner of her nail, a habit that seemed automatic, unconscious, like something inside her was trying to distract itself from the mouth that had just revealed a secret. He crouched down slowly, to be at her level. "Are you saying your mother is dead?" She didn't respond right away. Her eyes were locked on the floor, as if stepping onto that memory might make her fall through it. "I saw it," she finally said, her voice faltering. "Not all of her, just the hand. He took me there when I was 9. A pause. "He wanted me to know what happens to people who disobey." Dorian's chest tightened. Her face didn't look 11. It looked like someone who had buried too much inside. He sat next to her on the couch, careful not to touch her. "Lena, why didn't you ever tell anyone?" She looked at him with something between anger and distrust. "Tell who? The cops? They came once." He gave them coffee, showed some papers, smiled. And after that, she went quiet. Dorian understood without her needing to finish. He stood up, his mind spinning with possibilities, risks. He knew people at the DA's office, in child protection agencies, but he had never faced something so raw, so personal. His life was made of spreadsheets, data, contracts, Now he was looking at a girl who carried a crime in her body, and for some reason, she had trusted him enough to say it out loud. She walked over to the window. The sun was trying to cut through the morning fog. She looked outside like she was waiting to see something or someone. The house was small, a structure behind the garage. I only went in once. She closed her eyes. The door was locked. He had the key. Said it was where he kept the family secret. I thought it was just some adult joke, but when we went in, the smell. She swallowed hard. I've never forgotten it. Dorian felt a chill. It was the kind of story he was used to reading, about in articles, documentaries. He'd never imagined being in one, especially not as a central figure. If you take me there, he said, I can try to fix this. She looked sideways at him. Are you going to call the cops? Her voice sounded more like a challenge than a question. He hesitated. Not yet. First, I need to see it with my own eyes. That seemed enough for her. That afternoon, he took her to a clothing store, picked out basic, modest pieces. While she tried on jeans in the fitting room, he waited outside, eyes darting to the door every few seconds. Paranoia was already setting in. Her stepfather could be anywhere, and Dorian had no idea how far that man was willing to go. On the drive, back to the apartment, Lena suddenly said, You're going to regret this. He frowned. Why? She fastened the seatbelt slowly. Because no one gets out of this clean, not even the ones who help. Her words felt old, like something she was repeating from someone else. Or worse, something learned through pain. Dorian thought about backing out, taking her to a safe institution, going through legal channels, walking away. But it was already too late. Her face, her knees on the garage floor, the sound of the creaking jack, it was all inside him now. There was no pretending it was just coincidence anymore. That night, she slept. For the first time. And so did he. It was a tense sleep, but real. He dreamed of his mother, a woman who had also disappeared early. Not physically, but emotionally. Always present, always distant. Maybe that's why Lena's face disturbed him so deeply. He saw in her the same emptiness he'd grown up trying to understand. The next morning she called him with a steady voice. I want to show you. He understood, grabbed the car keys, grabbed a flashlight as if he already knew what he was about to find. On the way to the garage, the silence between them wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was focus, preparation. But there was something no one expected. As they approached the street where everything began, a police cruiser was already parked in front of the garage. And the stepfather wasn't alone. The sky was overcast, heavy with low clouds that seemed to press down on the city. The light was grey, filtered, without warmth. Dorian hit the brakes 100 meters from the shop. The police car had its driver's side door open, and one officer was speaking to the stepfather at the gate. Lena, in the passenger seat, shrank into herself. Her fingers clutched the seat fabric like she could hide inside it. The air in the car grew dense, almost solid. They're there, she murmured. Why is the police there? Dorian had no answer. He kept watching, trying to read the scene. The stepfather was smiling. His posture was relaxed, confident. The officer seemed to be listening more than talking. Then Dorian saw it. A second man standing near the side gate, wearing a black jacket and holding a leather folder. He wasn't a cop, and he didn't work at the shop. He had the posture of a lawyer. That changed everything. They're not here to investigate, Dorian said under his breath. They're here to protect him. Lena didn't say a word. Her jaw was clenched, her eyes were dry, no tears. This wasn't new fear. This was old fear, returning. Dorian gripped the steering wheel. They needed to fall back, rethink. But before he could reverse, the stepfather turned and smiled directly at them. Dorian jerked the car into motion. We're getting out of here now, he said. But Lena was already shaking. He saw us. On the way back, she said nothing. The silence weighed between them like lead until she whispered, barely audible, You should leave me. Dorian glanced at her, not taking his eyes off. The road. Why would I do that? She turned to the window. Because that's what everyone does. Those words hurt more than he wanted to admit. They got back to the apartment and locked the door. 3 turns of the deadbolt. Dorian activated the security alarm for the first time since he moved in. In the kitchen, he tried to make something. Coffee, toast. His hands were trembling. The feeling of being watched wouldn't leave him. In the living room, Lena sat on the couch again. The TV was on some random channel, but she wasn't watching. Later, Dorian got a call from an unknown number. He picked up on the second ring, a deep male voice, calm, deliberate. "You took something that doesn't belong to you. Return it." Before Dorian could say a word, the line went dead. He looked at Lena. She hadn't moved, as if she'd been expecting this from the beginning. The tension climbed in his chest. He was facing something much bigger, deeper. He tried to call an old contact, a retired detective who owed him a favor. No answer. Then another blow. When he checked the building's security system, he saw that one of the hallway cameras had been disabled since that morning. "He already knows where you are," Lena said out of nowhere. Dorian turned. "How do you know?" She took a breath. "Because he always knows. He doesn't lose his things, never has. And I'm one of them." It wasn't just pain in her voice, it was resignation. Dorian felt anger rising. He wanted to act, do something now. But fear held him back, fear for her, fear that he was playing a game whose rules he didn't know. He grabbed his laptop and started searching for any records on the stepfather. Name, cases, complaints. But everything came up clean, spotless file. Then something caught his eye. 1. Name repeated in 2 different documents. Otto Kremer. It was the name of a lawyer involved in child custody cases, and also listed as legal representative of the garage where Lena lived. Dorian cross-referenced the data and found the address of a property tied to Kremer's name. A house in a rural area, isolated, registered as agricultural use. Lena passed behind him and saw the screen. "That's the house, the one behind the garage," she pointed. "The basement, it's there. It's there." Dorian's stomach dropped. The answer was right there. But so was the trap. Lena stood behind him. Her voice came low but steady. "If you go there, you'll find it, but you might not come back the same." Dorian slowly closed the laptop. He knew he had to go. What he didn't know was that someone was already waiting for him in that house, and that the next door he opened might change everything forever. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to hit that like button. Night fell thick, starless, as if the sky had chosen to erase all witnesses. Dorian drove in silence down the narrow road that led to the rural address. The path was lined with twisted trees, trunks so old they seemed to carry secrets within their bark. In the back seat, a bag of tools, flashlight, gloves. In his chest, a weight that even the seatbelt couldn't contain. Lena had stayed at the apartment, locked in, told not to open the door for anyone. But before he left, she said something that still echoed inside him. "If you hear a noise, don't run. Listen. Sometimes the thing that scares you most is what needs to be found." He didn't understand it at the time, but now those words sat with him, like dead headlights in the dark. He reached the edge of the property just before midnight. An old iron gate, half fallen, opened to an overgrown yard. Weeds swallowed the path, and the house rose in the back, like a forgotten skeleton. Boarded up windows, peeling paint, sagging tiles. Dorian parked 200 meters away and walked the rest. With every step, the ground seemed to give way beneath the weight of time, and things that were never meant to be remembered. The back door gave easily. The inside of the house was cold, the air thick with moisture and rust. He used the flashlight, keeping the lights off. The floorboards creaked underfoot, and the shadows danced along the walls. He passed a decayed kitchen, a narrow hallway, until he reached a wooden door with 3 locks. This was it. The entrance to the basement. Lena had described the staircase as old and deep, and she was right. Each step seemed to beg not to be stepped on. He descended slowly, 1 foot at a time, trying to control his breath. The smell hit him on the 5th step, a mix of damp earth, mold, and something else. Acidic, metallic, the kind of smell you never forget. At the bottom, the space was smaller than he expected. Bare concrete walls, old boxes piled up, rusted tools, and a chest. In the corner, thick wooden panels wrapped in chains. The flashlight trembled in his hand. He approached. Every step made his chest tighten more. He knelt in front of the chest, fingers brushing the chains. They were loose. Someone had already been there. But there was something he didn't know. Yet, when he lifted the lid, the air rushed out like a breath held in for years. Inside there was no body, no bones, but photographs, hundreds of them. Old Polaroids, stacked and tied with twine. All of them showed children. Some alone. Some in groups, none smiling. On the back of each photo, dates, initials, numbers. Dorian staggered back, his stomach turning. This wasn't just about Lena. It was something much bigger. A network, a system. And the stepfather was just one piece. He swept the flashlight across the basement walls. Behind one of the shelves, he spotted something off in the concrete, a strange crease. He moved closer. It was a hidden door. He shoved it open with his shoulder. A loud crack. What he saw on the other side froze his. Blood. A small room. No windows. A mattress on the floor. A chain bolted to the wall. And an old video camera, still plugged into power. Next to it, a VHS tape labeled 11/06/2019. That was the year Lena turned 9. Dorian crouched, grabbed the tape, stuffed it into his pocket. As he stood up, he heard the sound, a metallic click behind him. He turned, and there he was. Otto, Kramer, the lawyer. Not wearing a suit now, just a black shirt and an expression of absolute control. Behind him, the stepfather. "We warned you, Mr. Dorian," Otto said calmly. "You made a poor choice." Dorian quickly measured the distance to the stairs. Not enough time, the stepfather shut the door behind them. Otto reached into his pocket, pulled out a syringe. "This won't hurt. It'll be fast." But then, the sound from above, a crash, shattering glass, muffled voices, and a voice. Lena. She came. She broke the promise. She disobeyed. And now, everything was spinning out of control. The sound of broken glass crunching underfoot echoed through the basement like a silent scream. Still on his knees, Dorian turned toward the door, heart pounding out of his chest. Otto hesitated. So did the stepfather. Both looked up toward the ceiling, where hurried footsteps pounded, followed by dull thuds, something or someone forcing their way in. And then she appeared. Lena, at the top of the basement stairs, her silhouette cut by the light. From above, her hair loose, messy, her hands trembling but her eyes unsteady. In her grip, something heavy, a metal rod, ripped from the front stair railing. Dorian would never forget the sound it made as she dropped it to the next step. She descended slowly. No blinking, no crying. Otto recovered quickly. "Lena, sweetheart, what are you doing? Go back. This isn't a place for you." His voice was soft, theatrical, but it no longer reached her. She kept coming down. Her eyes fixed on the stepfather. Her voice was low, tight. "You lied. You said she left." The stepfather swallowed hard. "Lena, it's a misunderstanding. You were little. You got confused. You saw something that wasn't..." But she had reached the last step. Dorian, still with the tape in his pocket, slowly rose to his feet. His legs were weak, but her gaze held him steady. That 11-year-old girl had more presence than any adult in that room. "You killed my mother," she said. The stepfather opened his mouth to reply, but Otto was faster. "She's going to ruin everything. Shut her up." And he lunged forward. But Dorian intercepted him. It was instinct. His body threw itself at Otto like a reflex. They both crashed to the floor. The syringe slipped from Otto's hand, landing at Lena's feet. She didn't move. She just watched. The fight between the two men was sharp, violent. Dorian took a punch to the face, hit the ground, got back up. He grabbed Otto's collar, who writhed like a snake trying to escape. The stepfather stepped in, but Lena stepped between them, iron bar raised. "Touch him, and I'll hit you." Her voice didn't tremble. That's when Dorian understood. She didn't need saving. She needed a chance to fight back. Otto managed to break free for a second and bolted for the basement door. But before he could escape, Dorian tackled him again. They crashed up the stairs, rolling. Otto's body slammed into the wall, went limp for a moment. Dorian stood, panting. Blood ran from a cut over his eyebrow. The tape was still in his pocket, and when he looked at Lena, something inside him broke loose. But there was something no one had noticed yet. The basement wasn't the only secret the house held. Lena, guided by something beyond her, crossed the room to the far wall. A crack in the concrete, a jagged line she'd never noticed before. But now it called to her. She touched it with her left hand. The wall felt hollow. She began tapping. The sound echoed back. It was a door, a second passage. With effort, she pulled it open, revealing a hidden compartment, a narrow hallway, almost a tunnel. At the end, a chair, and a wooden box. Inside there were no bones. There were papers, fake adoption records, birth certificates, contracts with government seals, and among them, a photograph, her mother, next to Otto, younger, smiling, a wedding photo. Lena dropped the papers. Her head spun. The air disappeared. "He was my father," she whispered. Dorian, still at the top of the stairs, heard her. He came back down, picked up the documents, read them. Otto Creamer, attorney, married to Selena Weber. One unregistered child. Child's name, Lena Weber Creamer. Nothing made sense. And suddenly everything did. The man she'd called stepfather wasn't even that. He was just a hired piece, put in place to cover someone else's mistake. And Otto was the biological father who had chosen to erase his daughter in order to keep a secret buried. Lena collapsed to her knees, still holding the iron bar but with no strength to lift it. Dorian knelt beside her, placed a hand on her shoulder. "You're not alone." She looked at him, eyes brimming. But before she could say anything, Otto moved. His hand crept toward the syringe on the floor. He grabbed it, and this time, he was aiming at her. Otto's arm crawled across the concrete floor, fingers stretching for the syringe like it was his final anchor. Lena didn't breathe, her body frozen between revelation and danger. The man she'd hated her entire life, imagined as a monster from another world, was now not only part of her story, but the very beginning of it. Dorian acted before his brain could fully register the scene. In one swift motion, he stomped on Otto's hand with all his weight, a crack followed by a scream. The syringe flew out of reach, spinning until it landed beneath a metal shelf in the corner. Otto tried to pull his hand back, but Dorian was already crouched, gripping him by the shirt, their faces inches apart. "You're not touching her. Ever again." His voice was low and firm, and carried something Otto had never heard before: conviction. Lena backed away, as if the basement air itself were burning her skin. Her legs buckled. She leaned against the wall. Her hands ran over. Her face like she could peel it away, erase everything. "Why?" she whispered. "Why did you hide me?" Otto, even in pain, smiled, a broken smile, more contempt than remorse. "You were a threat, a reminder of a mistake. I tried to start over, but you kept living." Dorian shut his eyes. For a moment, the words echoed like venom. He stepped toward Lena. "Hey," he said gently. "You are so much more than a mistake. You're the only truth left in this place." She didn't answer. She was far away now, inside herself, retracing years of abandonment, punishment, silence. He reached for her hand. "Let's go." She hesitated. "What if he—" Dorian shook his head. "He's not doing anything else. Ever again." And then unexpectedly, Lena turned to Otto, walked up to him, kneeled. They stared at each other. In her eyes was something no child should ever carry: the weight of forgiveness and the power to withhold it. "You wanted me gone," she said, barely above a whisper. "But I learned how to survive, and now I remember." Otto seemed to shrink. That hit deeper than any physical blow. To be seen, to be remembered, to be confronted by the one you were supposed to protect. They climbed out of the basement slowly. Dorian carried the papers, the VHS tape, and the knowledge that what they held could bring down far more than a name. As they left, they locked Otto and the other man in the basement. They'd call the police later. But right now, Lena needed air. Outside, the night was finally breaking. The sky lightened slowly as if the world were testing the idea of starting over. In the car, Lena held the documents. Her fingers traced her name on the page as if it were a foreign object. "Did my mother know?" she asked. Dorian wasn't sure, but he answered with what he believed. "I think she loved you enough to try to protect you, even if that meant hiding you from everything." The drive back was quiet, but the silence was different now, not the silence of oppression, but of rebuilding, of something beginning to form, slowly, between two people who hadn't chosen each other, but who now depended on one another. Back at the apartment, Dorian made coffee. Lena took a shower. When she came out, she wore clean clothes, her hair damp, her eyes calmer. She sat at the table with him. "Are you really going to report all of this?" she asked. He nodded. "I'll start with someone I trust, a retired judge who handled cases like this. She still has weight." Lena stared into her mug, then looked at him. "Even if it involves you? Even if it cost you your old life?" Dorian took a deep breath, thought about his business partners, his investments, his reputation, built over decades. "My old life wasn't worth half of what yours is now." That sentence stayed between them like a bridge. For the first time, Lena smiled. It was small, shy, but it was real. But there was still something they didn't know. The man locked in the basement wasn't alone. On the phone that had fallen in the living room, its cracked screen had triggered an outgoing call. A recording had started. Voices, confessions, names. And on the other end, someone was listening. Someone who didn't want that network exposed. Someone willing to destroy everything. Before Lena could reveal what she really saw that night in 2019, the apartment was quiet when Lena woke up. Sunlight filtered through the curtains with an odd gentleness, like it didn't dare disturb anything. She looked around slowly, like someone unsure if they were free, or simply in a different kind of captivity. Her body hurt less, but her mind still throbbed. On the dining table, the basement documents sat in a neat stack, like an altar to Ba, a truth she never thought could exist. Dorian was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of milk absent-mindedly, his hair a mess, shirt wrinkled. For a moment, Lena just stood there in the doorway, watching. This man who had crashed into her life like an explosion was now making breakfast like a father, but there was no falseness in his movements. No obligation, just presence, a rare thing. "There's bread," he said without turning around, "and butter. I burned it a little, but I think it's still edible." She walked in slowly, sat at the table, took the mug he handed her. She didn't speak, just drank. He didn't say anything either. That morning was the kind you don't describe. You just feel. After they ate, he pulled out a folder. "I need to show you something." Inside were records, not just about Otto, but about other children who had appeared in the basement photos. Dorian had spent weeks investigating. Even after handing the case over to the retired judge, he found links to shell institutions, ghost clinics, forged adoptions. What Lena had lived wasn't an isolated case. It was a symptom of something deeper, a cancer. She turned the pages carefully, as if each face might explode with pain. She stopped on one. A boy. Dark eyes, short hair. He gave me a piece of bread. "Once," she said softly. "When I went 3 days without food, I never saw him again." The words came like stumbling into a memory while walking barefoot in the dark. Dorian wrote down the name. "We'll find him." She looked at him. "Why?" He didn't answer right away, then said, like someone finally understanding himself, "Because the only way not to carry all of this is to give some part of it back to the world, even if it's just one." That afternoon, they went to the police station with the judge. They brought the tape, the documents, the photos. Lena gave her testimony to a special team, psychologists, caseworkers, prosecutors. Dorian stayed by her side. and never once pushed her to say more than she wanted, but she told them everything. Every detail her young mind had stored for years, like an invisible scar. When they left, the world looked different. People passed by on the sidewalks, unaware of the bomb that had just been triggered. The walls of institutions trembled silently, waiting for the impact. Lena took a deep breath on the sidewalk. For the first time, the air didn't hurt. In the days that followed, their routine became a silent dance. She wrote small fragments of memory. He read them and kept them safe. Little by little, the rooms of the apartment stopped being hiding places and started becoming shared territory. She began to sleep better. He did too. Some nights they watched old movies, and on one of those nights she asked, "Do you have kids?" Dorian took a moment. "No, never did." "By choice? By fear?" She nodded. "Fear of what?" He smiled. "Of getting it wrong, of failing, of being like the people who raised me." Lena turned back to the screen. "You wouldn't get it wrong. You listen." It was a small sentence, but his body reacted as if it were an award or a request. The key. Next morning, the judge called. The network was taken down. 3 arrests, 20 warrants. Otto's been transferred to federal prison. But there was more. "We received a petition. Someone filed for temporary guardianship. Your name is on it." Dorian froze. "I haven't filed anything yet." "I know. It was her." Lena stood behind him. She'd heard everything, eyes down, shoulders tense. "If it's too much, I understand. I just thought maybe it was worth trying." He turned to her, walked over, kneeling. "It's not too much. It's exactly right." She took a deep breath, like someone coming up for air, and at that moment, a message came to Dorian's phone. Unknown number, no text, just a photo, the front of their apartment, taken minutes earlier, and in the background, the shadow of someone they had never seen, but who had been there from the beginning. Dorian stared at the phone like it had frozen time. The photo was recent. The angle proved it was someone close, someone who knew exactly where they were, and when. In the background, the silhouette, undefined, watching. But there was something in the outline of that figure that sent a chill up Dorian's spine. It wasn't Otto. It wasn't the stepfather. It was someone who hadn't revealed themselves yet, and that made it worse. Lena looked over his shoulder, saw the photo. She didn't say anything. But her tense posture and fixed stare revealed that she understood the danger. Dorian took a breath, turned off the screen and said, "Pack a small bag, just essentials." She didn't ask why. She just obeyed. 15 minutes later, they were in the car. The city looked indifferent to the storm unfolding beneath its surface. People going to work, kids headed to school, cafes serving up normal life. Dorian drove with no set destination, just the urge to disappear for a while. The network had more tentacles than he had expected. The photo wasn't just a threat. It was a move, a signal. At the third traffic light, Lena broke the silence. "Do you think they want to take me?" He kept his eyes on the road. "I think they want to erase you, like they erased every trace for years. You're the only one still alive. And you remember, they drove for 3 hours, reaching a house in the countryside. A property that once belonged to an old friend of Dorian's, now deceased. The place was abandoned, but still secure. They locked the windows, sealed the doors. For 2 days, the world stood still. But on the third night, the dog started barking. Lena woke up first. Silently, she crossed the hall to Dorian's room. He was already sitting up in bed. Flashlight. In one hand, iron bar in the other. "Stay behind me," he said. She nodded. They moved slowly down the wooden stairs. The noise came from the barn. The wind wasn't strong enough to make the door slam like that. Dorian stepped outside, carefully circling the house. The barn door was ajar. The crickets had gone. Silent? He pushed it open gently. Only darkness inside and the old scent of damp wood. Then the sound. Light footsteps on hay. He raised the flashlight, and the beam found eyes. Not an intruder. A boy, thin, dirty, hiding behind hay bales. Maybe 9, maybe 10, haunted eyes, trembling lips. When he saw Lena behind Dorian, he froze. She stepped forward. "I know you," she said quietly. "You're the boy from the photo." He didn't answer, but his face confirmed it. It was him. The one who'd once given her bread. The one who'd vanished. His name was Milan. He had escaped from one of the centers, part of the same network. He'd been hiding for weeks, surviving off scraps, avoiding voices and black cars. When he heard someone had spoken out, when he heard Otto had been confronted, he came out of hiding. The next day, Dorian took Milan to a secondary prosecutor's office. The judge was already waiting. "This changes everything," she said. "We now have multiple surviving victims and a network that's still alive." The DA began filing motions to track down the remaining names, but the judge warned, "If we move now, they'll scatter. We need direct evidence, something that ties the leaders." And it was Lena who remembered. The tape. Going back to the basement was a risk, but Dorian knew if they didn't close this, it would never end. They retrieved the tape. With official authorization, they brought it to a technician. The footage was recovered. And it showed more than they ever expected. Otto speaking to someone off camera, mentioning names, bank codes, deliveries, people inside the system, and at the end, a voice answered. A name surfaced in the audio, the same name that appeared on political donations and social programs. A sitting judge, powerful, influential, that was it. The footage was sent straight to federal authorities, and in the next 48 hours, everything exploded. Arrest warrants, frozen assets, a national press conference. Lena's name wasn't revealed, but the media was already calling her the girl who unraveled the knot. That night they returned to the apartment, for the first time without fear, but when they entered, an envelope waited beneath the door. White, no return address, inside, a single handwritten message. "She's not the last." The envelope still lay on the table when Lena woke up. Morning light slipped through the window with a shy warmth, and for a second it almost felt like a normal home. Dorian was making coffee, but his face gave away the weight he now carried. That single sentence, "She's not the last," had lodged itself on his shoulders like a boulder. Lena approached quietly, picked up the paper, ran her fingers across the ink as if trying to feel the person behind it. No signature, no scent, only certainty that despite everything they had done, someone was still watching, and someone still spoke of others, other girls, other silent childhoods. She placed the paper inside a larger envelope, labeled it in her handwriting, still childlike, but now carrying a strength no school could teach. Secondary evidence. She looked at Dorian. "It's not over." He nodded. "I know. But that day, they didn't run. They didn't hide bags or erase trails. They walked out the front door and headed to the city center. They sat on a park bench, watching people pass by, dogs running, children playing. It felt strange to see joy, almost strange to feel peace. Lena watched a little girl, maybe 6, running with a blue dress and a balloon tied to her wrist. She smiled. Then the smile broke. "I had one like that," she said. "When I was 6, it was yellow, tore the first time I fell." Dorian looked at her. "You remember?" She nodded. "Most of the bad stuff, yeah, but the good stuff too. And when I remember the good things, well, it's worse." He understood. They spent the rest of the day in the comfort of silence, the kind that forms between people who no longer need to protect themselves from each other. At sunset, Dorian called the judge. "We need protection, but not for us, for those still inside." The network had been dismantled, but the threads left behind were invisible and dangerous. With support from the district attorney's office, they created a project. Lena came up with the name Cold Light Project. Maybe a personal irony, because everything she'd lived happened in the shadows, but now she wanted others to see the truth, even if the light was cold. The project aimed to identify, protect, and give voice to children in extreme risk, often hidden behind false family ties, forged adoptions, or front institutions. Dorian used his influence and personal wealth to fund the program's first 6 months. He said it wasn't charity, it was debt. Lena smiled when she heard that. "You're starting to sound like me," he laughed. Actually, I think you're teaching me how I should have lived. In the first week of the program, they received a case. An 8-year-old girl rescued from a nursing home where they pretended she was the director's niece. She was thin, mute by choice, and slept sitting in the corner of her room. When Lena saw her for the first time, she knelt down, held the girl's tiny hands and said, "I know." "Me too." And the girl hugged her. In that silent embrace between two survivors who now recognized themselves alive, Dorian understood something. No campaign, donation, or court sentence could ever reach. What changes the world isn't just justice, it's presence. It's someone who stays, who listens, who touches without fear. Lena began to write not just memories, but stories. Fiction inspired by real pain. Children read them. Adults were moved. Her name was never made public, but her words began to spread. First in schools, then in forums, then across the internet. At the bottom of every story, the same signature. "I survived, not by luck, because someone stayed." Years later, at a conference on child protection, a woman stood up at the end of a keynote talk. She asked the speaker, "Do you know the story of the girl from the basement?" The man smiled. "I do. I watched her be born twice. Once when she was thrown into the dark, and again when she chose to go back and bring the others out." The woman wiped her eyes. "She's real." The man, grey hair, steady gaze, replied with the same calm he once had when he walked into a garage and pointed at a girl on her knees. "She's real, and she's still here, in every child who no longer has to scream to be heard." And outside the conference, on a bench next to the cultural center, a young woman was reading a grey-covered book. At the top, a simple title, "Swallow the Cry, Scream Later." No author name, but everyone who read it knew she was still there. And now, no one could erase her. Thanks for reading all the way to the end. But don't go just yet. Right here on the side of your screen is another powerful story waiting for you. Click, subscribe, and share. I'll see you there.